We are live. It's Friday night, guys. Welcome to episode 108 of Thompsin and Other Disappointments. Welcome to all. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to jump into the live chat, say hey. My guest tonight, super psyched about this one. My guest is an BBC, ex-Sunday Times bod. He's worked in the music industry and broadcast and print journalism. And now he runs Drownwed In Sound, the popular online music magazine and forum, which he started in 2000. And he's also the producer of the hit podcast The Trawl, which you might have seen. It's hosted by Gemma Forte, who you might have checked out on Sky News, and Marina Perkis from the Jeremy Fine Show on Channel 5. He and I have come to know one another through political campaigning in strategy circles, and tonight he joins me to discuss all things life, love, the universe, music, and politics. Please welcome my guest this evening, first guested show back in the UK for a while now, Sean Goddamn Adams. Woo!
Number 108.
You are.
That's a lot.
It's a milestone. Yeah. Do you feel special?
Yeah. I feel 107% special.
Good. That's exactly what I was shooting for. How are you? How's your summer been? It's been a weird time for everyone, right?
Has it been summer or apocalypse? It's quite hard to tell. The idea that you're meant to enjoy 41 degrees in London is not the one. Doesn't look as nice as the jealousy-inducing trip that you've been on, but I'm sure your listeners think was Bognor Regis, right? Otherwise, you won't get Patreon donations.
Yeah. I did feel like there's some sort of unease there about, like, you know, I'm trying to attract Patreons, I'm trying to attract support because I want this to be my, you know, thing that grows, and eventually I'd like to just be able to retire and do this all the time. And then at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I'm off on a fairly exotic holiday, but the way I've sort of justified it to myself, if indeed it can be justified, is like we didn't have a holiday for fucking years, Sean. So I was like, I've earned this.
Yeah, I've not left the country since October 2019.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm sure I've had time off, but it doesn't ever feel like it. Just feels like recovering from burnout. So yes, the weirdness of the creator economy, where actually to do it full time requires entire scale, which is why those X's are in my list of things that you reeled off, because I started a music blog in the year 2000 and it was all ad supported. Yeah. And advertising was really easy to get in the year 2003 to 2008. I started another website called The Quietus because advertising was so good that the people that bought advertising advanced us the money to start other websites. And then slowly but surely YouTube, like literally we're in the hellscape right now, took the price from about £8 per 1,000 page views to about 30p. And I watched it happen so fast. We went from being able to employ 5 people to not even being able to employ myself part-time.
Wow.
And all the while our traffic getting bigger. It was all like counterintuitive. What you got per click led to people needing to drive clicks. And by driving clicks, attention whores were the people that were going to run to the top of every tree. So Kanye and Trump are just symptoms of a poor economic landscape. And I spent most of my time. So I also ran a record label in amongst all this. And you could sell a lot of CDs in the early 2000s.
Right.
I sold like 80,000 copies of an album by an artist called Martha Wainwright. And I worked with Brett Anderson from Suede, and I worked with the Kaiser Chiefs and Bat for Lashes and all these musicians. And then streaming just came on, and it's like, again, streaming's price all set by advertising. The cheapest advert on YouTube basically sets the norm of how much you get paid on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and all those streaming platforms run by the biggest, richest companies in the world. So if that doesn't radicalize you against the super rich, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I mean, like I've had a couple of musicians and music managers and stuff on the show before, and it's kind of the same story. Like, I'm a music fan. I never worked in the music industry, although that was my aspiration, like way back. But it's the same story. I get same feedback from them where they're like, it used to be great. And in one guy's words, a chap called Alex Keevil, he's the lead singer of the Microdance, he was saying, like, if we had come out in like 99 or like 97, like with the the clout that we had, like in London, releasing records, the kind of industry backup that we had. He was like, I could have quit my day job and this just would have been my job. And we probably would have gone on to sell, 200,000 or 300,000 records. He's just like, that's just out the window. Everyone needs a full-time job now. And then that hinders your ability to tour. And it's just this sort of vicious cycle now, right?
Yeah. And it's also things like people like, oh, you make your money from live. And it's like, if you're playing a festival, unless you're one of the top 20 acts on the bill, you're probably just about covering your cost of performing. I think there's a lot of stuff in the industry which, like, people make their money on merch. Actually, the margins on merch are quite small. People make their money on live, and it's like, until you've done about 100 shows, you've not made any money. And then for the next 100 shows, you're paying off what you spent on the first 100 shows, and gear and rehearsals and all those things. It all adds up. So the economics of the industry are pretty bad, but I'm still like managing 3 musicians, looking at restarting my record label at the moment. Like, there's lots of space to do stuff that's new and different. So I'm sort of I'm in this headspace at the moment where the potential of metaverses, VR, like, they're all suddenly moving music into the video game space.
Sure.
And
licensing. Yeah.
And like TikTok, for instance, is a giant sync machine. Like, everyone has got their music sitting underneath soundtracking you and Davey wandering around your gardens.
Yeah.
That's all money that's coming back into the music industry. So there is stuff happening.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's one of these things where you have to exercise a bit of ingenuity, a bit of entrepreneurialism to it, and think, okay, well, look, if the traditional methods of generating an income as a musician are out the window, and we all accept that they are, how do you make money in the new world? And it does seem as though there's an opening there in terms of video game licensing or, movie soundtracks and that sort of stuff. I wonder to what extent the transferable skills of a creative, flowery musician are conducive with a sort of, go-getter entrepreneur. Like, how often do you find artsy kind of singer-songwriter types who are actually like, yeah, do you know what? We've got to think outside the box on this one, guys.
Well, I think if you think about it, the way we've turned everything into content, all musicians are also content creators. It's just the content they create is music. But the platforms they exist on are social platforms, that are video platforms, blog platforms, audio platforms. Like, musicians have to be competing with you. Like, and they're competing with Netflix for attention, and they're competing with breaking news. Like, all of it is all in the same soup. So this is the same with your local politician, or obviously the biggest news stories of the day are going to cut through. But if you're trying to get a story saying that you're up for election in your local area, probably for a lot of people, until they stick it on the top of YouTube or top of Facebook saying there's an election today, a lot of people don't even know there is one. In fact, one of the anecdotes on the trawl I thought was quite funny is that Gemma told us that she spoke to some colleagues that she worked with somewhere that wasn't anything to do with politics, and they didn't know who Liz Truss was. And it's like, when you think about the fact of how much media landscape's taken up by this stupid debate between two people trying to convince 0.3% of the electorate to get behind them. It's just absolutely ludicrous that it's dominating, and yet people don't even know who she is. Didn't even know her name. She's been foreign secretary for how long? We've been at a war, and it's like they still don't know who she is. Yeah. So all of that stuff is competing for attention.
Well, this is the thing. It's like in the circles that you and I move in, and I guess certainly from my perspective, the amount of time that I spend on Twitter or reading news or whatever. I
got circles moving and then you stopped.
Oh shit!
Got circles you moving and then you stopped. Something's going weird with my internet, I think.
Oh dear. I've got you okay. I hope that my machine's sort of recording you all right. So I'll carry on. But yeah, I sort of feel like with the amount of time that I spend on Twitter or reading news or engaging with you or Tan or whoever else, it kind of conditions my brain into thinking that these are giant news stories and that everyone is tearing their hair out and hysterical and frenzied about them. And they are giant news stories. Like the cost of living crisis is like a genuine catastrophic storm that's just over the horizon that has the potential to decimate the way a lot of the UK live. Like it's going to wipe out savings, it's going to wipe out pensions, it's potentially going to send you into negative equity, hike your interest. Like it's truly a terrifying thing. But yeah, I have to remind myself, as you sort of alluded to a second ago, there are huge chunks of the population who I am positive are completely unaware. They're just like, like cost of what? Like, oh yeah, I think I heard something about that on the radio when somebody flicked from one station to the other. I vaguely heard it.
Frozen again.
Have I frozen?
You're back.
Am I back? Okay. But yeah, so is that your read on things as well? Is that there's a lot of people who just don't know how bad things are politically at the moment?
I think we're like seismologists, and there's been an earthquake out at sea and there's a tsunami coming, and we know there's a tsunami coming, and most people have got Boris says it's all going to be all right, is optimism. Like that's where they can exist, because you don't need to know that there was an earthquake out at sea that's going to cause a tsunami. My A-level, my GCSE geography coming in handy there. But I think that when you consider that, for instance, the thing like the Lebedev party, like I don't even get the impression that most political journalists were even that familiar with that story. Like I think I read about it when the war in Ukraine began, because John Sweeney wrote about it on a piece for Byline Times, and he wrote about 10 reasons we should be concerned about the conservative connections to Russia. And he laid out the details, because I'd sort of vaguely heard of it, and I thought, oh, that just sounds a bit like maybe he was at a party and the guy also happened to be there. It was a party at his house, and then you made his son a lord, and his son runs the Independent. The Lebedev story, again, just doesn't feel like, I guess if you don't listen to like James O'Brien, or you don't like tune into Twitter as much as we do, that story has passed people by. When he brought it up in Parliament, it didn't even become a front page news story. It's far, far worse that a man had a beer with his staff and it didn't get any news headlines when the story broke the first time. Yeah,
well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because so the other thing about the Lebedev story was, so it wasn't just that he went to the guy's house and had a party with him and that the guy's dad was a KGB agent. It was that he was the foreign secretary at the time and carrying documents, and that he had gone straight from a NATO meeting to that with these documents.
About the Salisbury poisoning.
Yeah, and he had completely shaken off his security detail, or whatever it's called. So he wasn't being monitored. There's no record of what was discussed at this place. When he was asked if they discussed official government business, he said something vague and weird and lawyery, like I don't believe that anything was discussed, or like my recollection is that blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like a categorical, I would never discuss, and I'm positive that I didn't talk about UK government business. It was kind of vague.
Yeah, you'd think if you met a former KGB agent, which apparently Putin says there's no such thing, you're always a KGB agent.
Yeah.
I was just making sure we put an allegedly in there somewhere after your last sentence. This is what happened. This is what happens when you work at the BBC in media training. Yeah. And there's definitely something in amongst all of that you would not forget. I mean, how often do you go to a massive mansion party in Italy? I don't assume that Boris does that like 10 times a week. It's not like, do you remember if you took the bins out this morning?
Well, it's also, wasn't he photographed afterwards looking all dishevelled and hungover at the airport? And there were other people that were at that party who left early, who said, yeah, like women they're vacated, they're exited at like 10 or 11, and then it's just the boys and like these young girls, and so God knows what fucking went on. I mean,
Rory Stewart spoke about it a bit, didn't he?
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and he said he was invited and didn't attend because he found out what it was. It's like, right. And he was working in the Foreign Office with him at the time. Yeah, which is like, you start to relay these stories as if they're funny anecdotes.
Yeah,
and it's like, this is the person that's been running the country for the last few years. This is the country that people on the outside look in at, and we're meant to be doing international trade deals after we put sanctions on ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, and yet we're this is our advert to the world.
It is interesting though, like what you were touching on a second ago, that people don't seem to care an awful lot about this, and yet they do care about the beer and parties shit. And I remember reading something a while back where they said this journalist or opinionista was saying, like, if there's one thing that Brits really get riled up about, it's when they feel like they've been, like, somebody's pushed in front of a queue, or they, you know, the middle upper classes are getting a better deal than the working. Like, if they feel that something is unfair and they're being taken the piss out of, then that will get them riled. But in terms of politicians doing corrupt stuff, it doesn't seem to really move the dial much, does it?
No, and I think there's also hypocrisy probably ranks up there pretty high as well. And like, I don't think Keir Starmer really went after him for having parties. He went after him because the law was broken by 125 people. Well, it's not even 125 people. Like, it could have been 50 people who received 3 fines. We don't know any of the details. And the complete lack of transparency, it's a witch hunt. Let's stop this. It's like, well, if you've got nothing to hide, what's to fear?
Yeah, we're like living in opposite world at the moment, aren't we? Like, where we're trying to investigate what has happened and whether he's lied to Parliament about it, and thus he should be just kind of effectively struck off from the rest of his political career.
I mean, didn't he say he was looking forward to clearing the air and getting, like, moving on from it? That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. But he
like,
also
even just trying to keep up with all this stuff is hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's why most people zone out. It's the flood the zone with shit, Steve Bannon thing, isn't it?
Well, he also said, I think pre-Bannon, he said, like, what he likes to do is create chaos. Like, he'll create a scandal over here and then say something stupid over there, and then by the time somebody's kind of caught up with this scandal, he's already moved on to the next one. And it's a weird sort of way of politically operating, isn't it? Because it's like, it's almost playing the part of the clown, but like not in a sort of, oh, look at me, I'm very silly and I just said the wrong thing, but in a sort of coordinated, almost like Machiavellian way.
Well, people talk about the reason he wears that oversized suit because it's like a clown suit. Like, he never wears a well-fitting suit. And it's actually apparently not that I don't know anything about suits, but apparently not that expensive a suit.
Oh, really? That's surprising.
I mean, maybe his donors haven't been buying him suits. I mean, but I think there's something in the awfulness of it that it's so difficult to even want to pay attention anymore. Yeah. And I think that's what, like, the zoning out of it is probably what they're bargaining on. And it's like, but you can zone in on, oh, this guy that's a lawyer broke the law. Well, did he break the law? There was actually, when I dug into it, and I tried to dig into this a bit, Labour didn't want that election to take place because we were in lockdown, and it meant you couldn't really do the majority of things. And there were some exceptions, but they all kicked in about a week after the Beergate nonsense. So it was almost like they were setting it up as a, like, I don't know, like a honey trap, but not a honey trap. What's the right word? To basically make it so that they would have to meet somewhere.
Right.
Like, there's nowhere open. What you can do? Well, you're going to have to eat in the kitchen of your offices. Like, there was literally, anyway, I feel like even talking about it gives it oxygen. But what it does do is it shows that was it 12 days on the cover of the Daily Mail?
Yeah.
Like, and they haven't reported on the Lebedev stuff, from what I understand. Like, or they definitely not put it on the front page.
It's quite, I mean, I don't think newspapers always used to be this bad, this biased and sort of hysterical. It feels like, I mean, look, I wasn't alive in like the 1950s, but my sense is that, you know, the dad would come home from work in his like Mac and he'd put his hat up on the thing, and then the mum would be in the kitchen and go like, you know, I hope you had a nice day, dear. And then, you know, kids, you all sit around the thing, and then the news comes on at like 6 p.m. or something. And it's just like, you know, a wooden guy sat there going like, and the Prime Minister today, blah, 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 you know, just factual, what happened shit with a couple of quotes, and that was it. But I don't think there was any like bias and frenzy to it. And I think similarly with like print journalism, if you look back at old editions of the Telegraph, it's like a different fucking paper. It's like, and I wonder, like, at what point? I mean, look, you're more of a sort of a seasoned media head than I am. I'm just a sort of news junkie that eats up Twitter every day. But in your mind and in your experience, like, when did that change happen?
I think going back to what I said earlier, like clicks. Like if you think about it, the Telegraph and the Mail right now can lead the news agenda by getting something trending. And if some Lord Cruddas or one of those lords says something, it's got heft enough to it to put it on the front page of a newspaper. Then you go through the stages of paper reviews. Nick Ferrari sets the agenda in the morning for people that are not listening to the Today program. The Today program before they have to talk about it because it's trending on Twitter. And within 6 hours to 10 hours, the story's dead, not talked about again. But for that window of time, that's the news agenda. And if it's a big enough story and it picks up, then it ends up on Question Time. And then if the story's like still burning after Question Time, it ends up in the Sunday papers. And if a journalist can find something to add to the story, then the story has a second life to it the week after. And it's like all these things, you start to see the cycle of it. And it's a psychodrama. It's you've been upset by this thing and it can't be that bad. And then something else happens and it's worse. It's like last night, I think it was, there was another story about another minister that's been employed with alleged allegations about sexual impropriety. And you're like, that barely touched the sides now. Like, and I think like in music, like Kanye's been one of those examples that I'm fearful of what it means, because he had what seemed like quite a public mental health breakdown. He was almost encouraged to keep going because it was making so many headlines. Like all the stuff with him and Trump, like, I don't know whether any of that was real or staged, or like, I kept waiting for it to turn into some like Extinction Rebellion, like insurgency thing. But it just seemed like, no, that's where the attention was. So I went there. And it's that dopamine hit that you get when you get a massive load of retweets. People need that at different scales, and they will keep feeding into that feeding frenzy. And it's not about their only desire is to get more dopamine. And we've built systems which have gamified attention, and then we sit back and wonder why, these people that are really good at gamifying attention, they don't care why they're getting the attention. They just know how to get it. And like, you can talk about gender neutral toilets. I mean, I could post a tweet right now and get 4,000 hateful responses just by knowing which levers to pull. But often I can do that without thinking by replying to you on Twitter like I did this morning and then be accused of all sorts of people making assumptions about my politics, people making assumptions about, because they fill in all the gaps. They feel personally aggrieved. And you've emotionally struck someone, not intellectually. And I think people then will intellectualize what you've said because their emotions are hurt. And it's really difficult when everything at different scales in all parts of culture, like you start to see fashion shows start to go, like Lady Gaga's meat dress was a kind of like
was weird.
It was weird, but it was
and meaty.
It was kind of like a Guy Debord thing. It was like a piece of art in order to kind of get attention. And then you start to see that cars are now having like bizarre designs so they can get loads of headlines. Like the Greg's vegan sausage roll was not a big deal, but Piers Morgan knew that it would wind people up because it's a pork product that has been turned into something that's not pork. Like, and it's such a pathetic lever to pull because it's pulling on literal gammon emotions by saying that gammon is no longer on the menu, even though it is. Like great replacement theory is the exact same thing. It's like all these things being taken away from you and your life is being diluted. It's like, it's not. Just you're getting equity and equality with other people.
Or do you remember the halal meat thing? It was about 7 years ago, somewhere around that time, where a couple of the tabloids were just like, why am I being forced to eat halal meat? It's like, nobody's fucking forcing you. And you're not, like, you can eat any, like, it's fine. Like, it's not, I think a lot of people thought, oh, well, it's been blessed in a mosque, or it's been like fucking ridiculous. It's like, it's the same product. Just sit down and eat your fucking, like, but yeah, I mean, you're right.
Chlorinated chicken, though, it's great.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, we live in a country and in a sort of media landscape where you're right. It's sort of, you know, a mix of outrage and dopamine and I suppose a desperation. Like, I mean, you said earlier about advertising revenue. I suppose there's a big chunk of that to print journalism. So back in the day, you know, in older editions of the Telegraph, as I was wheeling out that example earlier, they would have this sort of guaranteed ad revenue coming in on a conveyor belt, people fighting over each other to get ad space in one of the, like, what, 3 or 4 national newspapers at the time. And now you've got plenty of different newspapers, you've got magazines, you've got radio competing for that same money. And so to get successful and to keep people's attention in versus the internet and versus like 24-hour news, they have to be more and more outrageous or engage in, I suppose, like the other big angle to this is that when the news used to be just news, like just what happened, like that was in a time when CNN didn't exist or MSNBC, and now the news part of it has kind of broken away, and actually because everyone gets the news instantly on Twitter or whatever, and what you're left with in the broadsheets is actually this deluge of opinion of just like, we think this is outrageous and here's why you should too. Like, that's, you know, people like Alison Pearson, people like God, what's his name, not the internationally renowned one, his brother that works for the Mail,
Peter Hitchens, the one that's still alive.
Yes, yeah, the alive Hitchens. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's something in that too. I think they've kind of pivoted way more to opinion stuff very aggressively.
Remind me in a second to talk about key performance indicators, because I think that's really key. But actually the music industry, in terms of similar timelines, so Blur versus Oasis took kind of indie and alternative music into the tabloids. By then having dedicated music sections, the music industry changed somewhat. Like the types of artists which were around in the mid to late 90s were very different. And obviously CD sales have boomed, like, but they constantly needed a story. So there's a few documentaries about the kind of Girls Aloud and Billie Piper and all those people, because they had to be falling out of a club in order to get in the papers, like, because that music but they would have been doing that normally, but the papers needed stories. So a lot of musicians and PR people and paparazzi knew that there was content to be filled, like pages to be filled, dedicated to music all the time. And some people lapped it up and played into it. Other people were just followed because they knew they could become a story. And you started to see the kind of, like, it shifted a bit now with influencers, because it's all about people turning up to an opening of an envelope. And it's like, this person turned up to an opening of an envelope. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's like, that's enough to, I mean, mostly people want that on the Instagram account of the brand, and the Instagram account of the influencer. So in a way it's decentralized a little bit, but it's still the same logic behind it all. But in music, it meant that a different type of musician with a different set of skills and a different kind of cultural epicenter opened up. And
there's a definite parallel there, isn't there, in terms of like chasing clicks for your blog, chasing clicks for your 3-minute clip of Piers Morgan Uncensored or whatever, and Blur and Oasis acting up to get media coverage, right? Yeah.
And you start to see all of like creator economy, like, also like you can use this stuff for good. Like I've posted stuff on this, like I used to run the Six Music social media accounts, and I've posted clips from the MASH report, which have done like 17 million reach on Facebook.
Wow.
Like clip around the time of Black Lives Matter, I shared a clip of Clara Amorfo narrating a brief history of Black British history. And there was nothing political about it. It was like factual, like things that you did not know about your own country. And that had something like 70,000 shares on Facebook. It's like some of the things where, like for instance, being cynical, I did things like the Prince Batman album is not Prince's finest record. It's also not one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. However, when it turned 30 or 25 or something, I posted happy anniversary to like the greatest soundtrack of all time. Right. It's not even Prince's best soundtrack.
No.
And that did a million reach.
Yeah.
But it had a jokey emoji with it, and it was a bit like a kind of meme, built as a meme within itself. And it was kind of like a wrong answers only post.
Yeah.
But that's playing to the attention economy. But that was, for someone, that was a fun 5-minute distraction in their day where they got to join in, pretend that they either agreed or really angrily disagreed that was, this was in the middle of lockdown, I think, if I remember right. And I mean, I also did like, there was one thing where right in the middle of all the bleakness of lockdown, I posted something like, one of our listeners had just sent a picture of their dog, and it was just like, is your dog enjoying Six Music more than this dog? And we got like 900 dog photos. and Lauren's sitting in the studio, and Lauren Laverne just went from doing this like kind of normal radio show to, oh my God, I've just seen this cute dog. She's like, her screen on her computer just kept filling up with dogs. And it just became this really sweet moment of funneling in, like, and using the attention economy in a nice way. So as much as I'm cynical and hateful of it all, like, there are ways in which it can become kind of a beacon and a bastion for people.
It's interesting though, because so the attention economy is not really a term I've heard an awful lot, but hearing you speak about it kind of rings a few bells. So like when I see what the papers say, or like tomorrow's papers today section, and it says something along the lines of, like, a Daily Express headline will say, Boris to go on tour to celebrate his achievements, right? They must know in the editorial room that printing a big headline like that about like Boris and his achievements, they must know that that's going to get people like me and you and whoever else to go like, are you fucking joking? Like, and screenshot it and share it around. Like, so I guess it's sort of, we sit here in disbelief. We sit here and go like, how can they be this dumb? But actually they're not. There's a kind of smartness to it, isn't there?
And we're signal boosting their posts. Yeah. We're probably giving credence to their audience that what they're saying must be true if we're upset by it. But then on the other side, you've got like, for instance, have you seen the Great Hack doc on Netflix? There's some stuff in there about advertising, and actually how negative adverts generate what I call enragement, which is engagement, but it's just making people angry on purpose. So they would share loads about Hillary Clinton on the kind of Trump campaign, but their adverts would get cheaper because the key performance indicator, what they at the time Facebook were calling meaningful social interactions, meaningful just meant someone had typed more than like an emoji. That meant their adverts got cheaper. So peddling hate meant that they could market their campaign, grow their reach, and then retarget, because retargeting is this other thing where because it knows that you like something, it gives you more of it. It's
or even
people that like this also liked
like loosely related subjects, right? Which was a big thing about like flat earth and anti-vax stuff, is like, if you like this politician or you had watched that documentary, let's route you to this content where 100,000 other people also wasted an hour. And
that's all the filter bubble stuff, which there's been lots written about, but it is like, you do become quite in a silo. But it's also like, for instance, just going like, I'm not going to dwell on it, but like, I messaged you something on Twitter today. I did not send it to 10,000 Corbyn fans, and I did not send it to Trump fans. It got linked to on a forum, and then as like I'm not saying it was purposely designed for a dog pile. Dogpiling's when you literally, it's rather than saying a pylon, you put something right in front of the people that's not going to agree with it. Anyway, so like that ability to to speak one to one, like, and that's obviously how like sting operations worked, when they would get someone to do, if you will bring the World Cup here, if you give us 4 million quid type of mics under the table. And it's knowing the audience that you're speaking to. Like, you have no idea, hearing that out of context, whether that was like Dom Jolly having a laugh with someone, or if it was someone generally trying to do that kind of deal. And it's like all these different things are all, and we've not even touched on deep fakes. Like, that technology now exists at scale to, like, I'm not even here right now. This is just me typing. But the there's a thing called Descript, where it can dub in your own voice if you've missed a word.
Really?
Yeah, it's really clever, and it's for podcasters as well. So,
it is for now. I mean, it's like I wrote a blog a couple of years ago because this idea just sort of like landed in my head. I was like, hang on a second, like, we're all getting, at this time, people getting quite excited about deep fakes, and I think the worst that we had seen or heard of was like a few dodgy like porn vids had surfaced of celebrities' faces sort of reskinned onto the porn actors.
There was the drunk Nancy Pelosi one as well, wasn't there?
Oh, was there? I haven't seen that.
They changed her voice to make it sound like she was really drunk in office.
Oh, really?
And it was just doctored, but again, I think they used that as an ad. That's like a hate ad.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're in the middle of. I broke your flow.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say. So I had this idea in my head. I was like, so hang on a second. Like, if deepfake technology continues to progress at the same rate that it had done up until that point, I was like, in the next like 2 to 5 years, probably not even that. At this point, this is 2 years ago. I was like, we are probably going to see our first political scandal rooted in a deep fake video where, like, I think I was sort of projecting forward. I was like, Biden's in the White House by this point, and somebody will release a deep fake of him doing something awful, like something upsetting to America, like burning an American flag at an event, or I suppose something, I don't want to say on brand for him, but something believable for him, maybe. Like, a lot of people say that he's, like, in those photos, he's getting a bit too close to the little girl, or something. Like, what if they exaggerated that in a different video? I was like, it's not outside of the realms of possibility that somebody will release that video and it will take the White House too long to verify that it's fake. And I was joking in the blog, going like, Biden's not even all there. So he's not going to remember if he was at a party burning flags or not. But now we're kind of knocking on that door, aren't we?
I mean, there's a musician called Holly Herndon who makes this like amazing electronica music, and she has created an open source essentially version of her voice. So they just released 70 tracks, all featuring her, none of which she had anything else to do with other than opening up the software for people to use it.
Right.
And her voice is owned by essentially a foundation. So the foundation gets a cut for every track sold. She gets a cut, and the artist gets a cut. And she's about to do a TED talk all about. She's about to bring out another version of it.
Right.
With her like real singing voice, not her like digital avatar voice that she's got. And it's like, this technology is there.
Yeah.
And I mean, all those. Like, anyway, we're a bit off topic, I think, but it is all within the media space, and in a time where you can watch Fox News and literally hear a lie said to your face, at a time when Johnson can lie and repeat a lie and bring up things like the Jimmy Savile thing, like such an egregious use of office and a position of power, and so
There's an argument to be made there, like, why would you even need to deepfake stuff when they can just lie at will anyway and nobody fucking checks it, right?
The like, when they do the Big Brother best bits when they leave the house, like when you're talking about the Express thing earlier, it's like all I'm hearing at the moment is supercuts essentially of all the worst things that Boris Johnson did, and you'd think in accumulation they would sound awful, but they're reaching us, they're not reaching the people in the party that want him still to be the leader. And it's like, and all of this stuff feels manipulative and like it's gaslighting in a way. And but they dig in deeper, and it's like that. Someone repeated that something I heard again earlier. Someone saying, like, we like him because he lies. Because
really?
Yeah, and it was like that's part of the thing they like, is that he can lie and get away with it.
Yeah. Bizarre, isn't it? But then would they have ever had that attitude about any other politician, like historically? Like if John Major had started lying in the 90s, would people have gone like, yeah, oh, I love that? Like to some extent it's his personality, right? He's always been a bit of a liar, and there's bluster, and there's,
It's such, the most weird thing about him is he values loyalty, and he encourages loyalty in everyone around him. Yet does he show that loyalty to his wives?
No.
Does he show that loyalty to anyone, like Rory Stewart not voting with a whip?
Yeah.
Like all of this stuff, like he does not show loyalty, and it's fascinating that it seems to be the thing he values the most and does least, and all of it is one rule for me and one other rule for everyone else. Like for instance, that woman I just said, that example of I like it because he lies. There's nothing to stop me going on and doing a vox pop saying I'm a Tory supporter, and like saying, oh, I really love the fact he cheats on all his wives. There's nothing to stop me doing it. Like, who's going to verify my vox pop? And it's like, and to bring it back to music, I've always had a problem with really positive and really negative reviews of records. Music criticism is essentially what I did. I was more of a critic than a journalist, mostly because I'm a good moaner, I think. And
Snap.
The verified, verified moaner. But I have no idea what someone's favorite album of all time is when they're giving an album 5 out of 5. There's no context. Like their favorite album of all time might be the Mr. Blobby Greatest Hits. And yet, on every poster, on every bus, on every like tweet, they're gonna go 5 out of 5 says Vogue or The Guardian, or like, and there's no verification for it. Like, who said it?
Yeah,
doesn't matter. The publication did. Did the publication employ someone that knew what they were talking about? Well, likely. Did they employ someone with a very like attuned taste to things? Probably not.
Yeah.
And like in journalism, before you could hear records, I think that happened a lot more. But now that it's become, so this is the big thing that's shifted, and the something that's quite uncomfortable about music journalism right now is that music is everywhere. So if you're negative about any music or any musician, then you're seen as just being just awful because their fan base can find you, their fan base think they're amazing, and there is no space even to be constructively critical. I mean, my first experience with this, we gave an album 8 out of 10, which is a good review, and the A&R man, who I sort of knew over drinks and things, not someone I would ever call a friend, called me up and ranted, and I was like, I hadn't read the review at the time, and I assumed it was like a 2 out of 10 or something. And he's like, I can't believe you didn't give it top marks. Like, I can't believe you slagged it off. And it's like, I went and read the review while he was on the phone. I'm like, are we on the same planet? Like, it's got 8 out of 10. It's come from someone who's a super fan of the band, and they're just not that into the new album compared to the albums they've spent half their life with. Yeah. Like, they're never going to love a new album as much as their favorite album by the band. Unless they've had like 3 bad albums before and it's a return to form, then it might get a slightly high. And it's like, all this stuff is nonsense. But
8 out of 10's a pretty good. Like if I read a review and it had 8 out of 10 and it was mostly positive, which for 8 out of 10 you would assume it would be, then it would be enough for me to go and buy the albums. It wouldn't put me off, right?
But he knew a 10 out of 10 would get more traffic and would sell more records. Not that we were selling that many records, but as somewhere that championed the band, our review might lead to a better review in The Sun and a better review on MTV and like more airplay on Six Music. Like, and it was all of those things it's all interconnected. And I think the going back to what we said earlier about, well, the Telegraph is essentially like, not propaganda is probably not the right word, but it's probably not the wrong word, for a comms department that wants to put a message out, or a funding body that wants to have a dial, like for instance GB News. Like, you can't look at GB News and think it's anything other than a machine to put a message out that people want out there. Like all the anti-net zero stuff, and then you discover that one of the guys behind the company used to have shares of half of a massive oil refinery in Russia, and the other money's coming from Saudi Arabia. It's like, well, of course they're going to be putting Farage espousing net zero. Like, Is espousing the right word? I feel like I'd use the word slightly more smart than I know.
I used it this morning in our tweet exchange, so maybe it's my fault I've planted it, but I think you used it fine. I felt similarly when there was a period, I think at the beginning of the Ukraine war, where people like Steve Baker were all up on my timeline, raving about
All up in my grill.
all up in my grill, Sean, about like fracking. Just to be clear, I'm sure Steve Baker has no fucking idea who I am, but I saw a lot of like, so Steve Baker and Farage and Darren Grimes, like all the usual fucking coterie of cunts, right? Just blasting out about fracking. And then I read this guy's tweet thread, and I never remember his fucking name. I'll have to dig it out and then put it in the blurb of this episode so people can find it. But he did a sort of a deep dive on these guys, and he was like, if you look at people who donate to Steve Baker's office, he was like, you can just trace the money. Like, it's really easy to do. Yeah. And the guy sort of went through why fracking is actually not really going to solve anything.
We don't have enough water to do it either. It uses loads and loads of water.
Yeah,
we could put our sewage down there, maybe.
Yeah, kill two birds with one stone. He touched on that, but he also touched on, he said there's not enough gas down there to really make a dent in terms of the supply that we need. And he said even at its peak, it would only sort of top out at about 10% of our energy mix.
I think I read something, it's going to take about 3 years to start getting it on board. Yeah. And there's only about 5 to 7 years worth of gas down there. So it is not the dinosaur dick that you thought it was.
Yeah. And then this guy at the end of his thread was just like, so you have to ask, why is Steve Baker promoting this? And why are these other individuals doing it? And he's just like, because the people that fund them, the people that donate to them, they know that it's not going to solve any problems. But what it will do is make like 5 or 6 directors of those companies fucking billionaires, like almost overnight, because investment money will just flood in. And I was like, fuck, like, it's so rotten, isn't it? Like, imagine people that probably you and I know, like friends, colleagues, like people we used to know in our hometowns and stuff, who eat this shit up. They're just like, yeah, fracking. We should be fracking, guys. That's sorted out. Why do we have to input like natural gas? Ukraine, we should just fuck it all off and frack our way to victory. That's what they did in America because they're smart. Like, and I'm just sat here going, oh man. And there's like no chance of anything like that being
isn't that Michael Moore documentary all about how fracking went wrong and polluted the water supply? Is that fracking related? Maybe I read about it. I feel like I read about it on a plane at like, I either watched it or read about it on a plane in like sleep deprived state. So I'm not convinced I know that fact for a fact. But yeah, like you also like Steve Baker and Us Versus Them, or Us for Them, whatever they were called. They were the people that picketed outside schools, gave kids flyers telling them not to get their jabs for coronavirus. And you look and it's like he's been a big supporter of them and brought them in. Like they had a photo op outside Parliament with him, or someone in his little weird coterie. You put the word coterie in my head now as well.
Just like peppering your brain with the 5 or 6 words that I do know.
But you start to just like look at these politicians and it's like, well, who's paying them? Like, who do they work for? It's like Boris Johnson's working for whoever's paying for his wallpaper. At least for that next hour after it's been paid for. Like, he's not working for us because, as he says, his salary's chicken feed. Like that is the world that they live in, and it's like he's telling us to buy kettles. Like, and it's like, well, like one of the biggest donors in the Tory party is also something to do with electronics or beds or something. I did look this up once because I was curious who their biggest donor was.
Like property developers, I thought.
Maybe. Oh, was it like Barrett and something?
Yeah.
One of those big.
Because I've also looked into this because I was like, who do we really need to know is like funneling money into the Tory party? And it was like, I don't know if it was Barrett or not, but yeah, it's sort of as soon as
Thank you for my allegedly.
Well, I'm protecting myself, really, Sean.
I can't remember either.
Yeah, but I was like, oh right, okay. Well, that sort of explains a lot. In terms of like the housing crisis and NIMBYism and what brownfield property they will sign off on and what greenfield areas they won't.
Well, they can cover it in shit, and it's all brownfields now.
Yeah. So everything's depressing, everything's fucked. Let's try and lighten the tone somewhat. Do you have?
I mean, that was me being upbeat.
Oh right, okay. So, do you have much sort of hope or faith that things could be different, that we could sort of turn a corner in terms of the media landscape, the journo-political sphere?
I think that there's a huge hole in the media landscape. There's like the Young Turks in America showing a kind of sign of what could be. I think when you look through the podcast chart, it's not the same as looking through what's like that Tortoise podcast about the Lebedevs, for instance, was massive for weeks and weeks on Apple. Like there is interest out there and there's an intrigue, and there is people needing a media that speaks for them. Like watching TikTok numbers that people like you and Tan and Davey and people get, like you can tell that there's, I mean, you speak to younger generations, it's like they were all angry that Rage Against the Machine didn't play Reading, a band that have not released a decent record in 20 years. It's like, I don't think they've even really released a record in 15. And yet they are one of the most woke bands in the world. If you think about it, like that was my fast track into anti-capitalism at a very young age. And then very quickly became very capitalist. I mean, as much as you can be.
Yeah.
Without hating yourself completely. It's like the I'm not really the I think there's enough broken in the system now that I think it's very difficult for anyone to not look at it critically and look for hope and answers. Like the extremes, you got Extinction Rebellion, but every time there's a petition about something that's not that ridiculous, like 1 million people will sign up to it. Like the lionizing of is lionizing the right word? No, it's not the right word. The celebration of Marcus Rashford, like kind of shows that as a country we're not as bad as what's like. And often all these studies come out and you're like, oh, like people loved Corbyn's free broadband idea after all. Like the nationalizing our energy companies. Well, it makes a lot of sense now, but it wouldn't have made sense if there was a big hoo-ha about it 18 months ago and the right-wing media is saying something else. The thing I think that gives me hope at the moment is Stop Funding Hate. Like they've essentially defunded GB News' advertising.
Yeah.
And all they do is point out who's advertising and what's just run on a publication. And then often we'll find, look, your corporate campaign saying that you're behind LGBT rights, and yet here's an editorial which is completely against your brand values that your advert's in the same magazine as, you are funding this hate preaching, because it is essentially hate preaching, a lot of it.
Yeah, it's a very, very clever campaign, like right from the concept. Like, and they've been going for about 3 or 4 years now.
I think it might be even longer.
Yeah, because I remember when they first kicked off and they were aggressively targeting the Daily Mail, and unsurprisingly, the right-wing press really went after them. They were like, this is an attack on freedom of speech. This is what they're trying to do is push newspapers to report in the way that they want things to be reported, and that's not a free press. And I'm just like, I don't think it is. Like, all they're doing is actually quite cleverly holding up a mirror to these brands. And as you say, like just saying, look, if you're talking the talk, try walking the walk as well. Like if you're going to advertise in the Daily Mail, then just know that the pages that you're advertising in between are saying this shit. Like, and are you comfortable with that? I think they did a great job.
I think, again, like going back to things people dislike is hypocrisy. All they're doing is pointing out hypocrisies. They're not doing anything particularly radical other than taking the receipts and sharing them. And it's like, yeah, they're posting it into an echo chamber, but I've seen like, for instance, we tried to block brands advertising on our site at one point. Like, you can pretty much block gambling. Like, there are stories of people using their first free bet and getting like £500,000 in debt within like 48 hours.
Really?
Like, online gambling is dangerous because it empowers an amateur to think that they can win. And it gives you a free way, like, so the free advertising for gambling is kind of dissipated somewhat, because of seeing that. And also, like, people can put a cap on when they first join, or all these different, anyway, there's stuff there that, like, cigarettes I was never going to run. Like, at one point, our advertising slots, we gave like 20% away to charities because we could. Like, why wouldn't you? You've got the space. Like, Love Music Hate Racism used to get free ads on our site, and it's like, I'd rather give that away than charge, than be getting money off the back of things that I really disagreed with. So I think culturally, those kind of things, again, are all going to start to pick up and add up. But until we start doing that with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and they're like, those platforms are accepting those adverts. And a lot of that gets pointed out. It's like, because, for instance, the Google ad network is often the reason why really bad adverts end up online next to editorial that it really jars with. But often because the semantic way in which it knows what's on the page thinks that it's relevant, but often becomes the most offensive thing to what it is. Right. I mean, for instance,
like keyword sort of thing. So if Peter Hitchens, for example, not saying he has written something like this, but if he did say in his Mail on Sunday editorial that all gay people were evil, and then it would pick up like the keyword gay, and then advertise something along those lines, or
would do. Yeah,
I see.
All these things are broken, but they're all fixable. And you can, if you're taking out an ad campaign, put domains you don't want to advertise on. Like, all these things are possible, but they take time and consideration. And I feel like there was another thing that we were going to chat about. I'm not sure if we've drifted through lots of topics. We haven't even talked about the trawl, which I kind of like the meta-ness of talking about a podcast on a podcast.
Yeah, well, I think we've got another 5-7 minutes left, so let's throw in a little plug there. So how did you get involved in producing the trawl then?
I messaged Marina a few years ago thinking that I wasn't sure who was behind the account. Like, I wasn't sure if it's a pseudonym because I couldn't find much when I Googled her.
Right.
And I was just like messaging saying, your Twitter's great. You managed to sum up a story in such a way. And we got chatting.
Such a good knack for like a unique talent for taking like complex political anger and just boiling it down to just a simple kind of nuts and bolts thing that people can just easily consume. Like, that is her talent.
And I think amazing. Since I first spoke to her, I think she's doubled her audience from about 120,000. Which no one does in the current age of Twitter. Like, she's growing and growing and growing all the time. And I messaged her saying, how come you've not got a podcast? Like, it sort of, I was like, I want to hear more of your insight, because like, it's only on Twitter. It's like, you don't seem to have a column. Like, you're only very rarely on Jeremy Vine. And so we talked about the idea, and she introduced me to, which is how I kind of got to know you. I got added to a WhatsApp group with, is that a secret? Have I just broken the like law of the group? The group doesn't exist. The kind of motions towards what's possible in kind of a future politics, kind of like continued the conversation, and then Marina and Gemma were kind of swapping seats on Gemma Forte. We're swapping seats kind of on Jeremy Vine, and they were like, I think I found someone I want to do my podcast with. So we chatted about some ideas. I was like, well, it needs to be really easy for you. And we struck on this idea of just going through Twitter, and because they're doing it anyway, and pulling out brilliant videos like yours, and pulling out kind of nuggets of insight to discuss, and also nuggets of shit to discuss. And so I think and it just feels like the world's ripe for the right ideas. Yeah. And it's like, how do you evolve what's possible in the landscape? And it's like, we'll pick two really smart women that really enjoy scrolling through Twitter, that are really good at Twitter and show off the best of Twitter. It's like that feels like Venn diagrams overlapping, but you need to know that their Venn diagrams are there in the first place. And
yeah, I'll tell you what's great about those two together as well is, so I feel like sometimes with Twitter accounts, they're pretty good at pulling apart a story or putting a little witty one-liner in, and I'm going to put myself in this camp, right?
Yeah, you're very good at witty one-liners.
Well, that's very kind of you, thank you. But it's not like fluid. I'm not just, I mean, I'm here. We've been talking for an hour, Sean, and I'm not like just a witty one-liner pun machine. I'm like,
I thought it was me bringing you down.
No. Like I have to sit down and consciously think about what I'm doing. Whereas with those two, it seems so sort of effortless, and they bounce off each other, and they have this sort of, just like a conveyor belt of like pretty solid insight.
Can I let you in on a secret?
Sure, go for it.
They've only met in person once.
Really? So how do they? Wait, now I'm gonna ruin the mystery for your podcast. So how does that work then? So they do it over Skype also, or they record their parts separately?
Yeah, we record it. They record it separately. That would be crazy. But yeah, they've only met in person once, and I keep thinking because we're only 7 episodes in, and they've got this flow like two people have known each other for years.
Yeah.
And it's like we just recorded. I just edited the new episode this morning, and I just was listening to it, thinking it's so odd that they're not like drinking buddies or like they kind of got. And it's the fact that like they know what the other one's probably going to think or say about a topic, and like we've got a little WhatsApp group to prep the show, and they often will share the same link. Like within a few hours of each other, of like, have you seen this? And it's like, yeah, I posted it a minute ago, you missed it.
It's nice though, isn't it? It's like sort of, there's something nice about, because most people forge friendships in their teens and like early 20s. And I think as you get a bit older, kids enter the equation, long-term relationships, people move away, and it's harder to build friendships from nothing, I think.
Yeah.
Or it is for me. Maybe I'm just fundamentally unlikable.
No, I've had exactly the same. Like, I tend to build friendships around projects, and then I forget. Oh, you're meant to maintain that when the project ends, or like, or like,
see you later, bud. Like
the lots of people that I know have like done exactly that. They've moved. Like, there was a phase of just people I was friends with all moved to LA, and I was like, so if I go to LA, I can hang out with loads of my friends. But it's like, why do I need to travel so far?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's sort of like back home. Like, if I moved back to Maidenhead, which is only like fucking 40 minutes away, I'm relatively sure I could have a pretty full and active social life. Like, just put the kids to bed. I could go down the pub, catch up with people, shoot some pool, and but it's that's not our life at the moment.
But it's also, are they friendships or are they just long-term connections? Because it's like the different thing is of like what a friendship is. I realize we've gone very off topic, but it's actually on topic because
it's
actually
the
isolation of the modern world is one of the reasons why so many people are so toxic, because they need belonging and they end up belonging to fascist groups. Like, when you actually dig into like the insurrection, like a lot of people just got caught up in a Telegram group or in a 4chan channel, and it's like that need for belonging. And the way in which, like, one of the biggest cons at the moment is the way that wellness is outsourcing the need for a functioning mental health service. So, like I've been to a therapist that told me to meditate. I'm like, I've got all this going on in my head, and what you're telling me to do is to listen to my thoughts quietly. Like, that is the last thing that I need, and you've completely misunderstood what's going on. And it's like all of the if you start to dig into what's happening in culture, the music of loneliness, the like sad songs, sad bangers have been really big for years. And it's because there is this like melancholic, disconnected, we're more connected than ever, which actually means we have lots of like shallow, like, for instance, in theory, we are friends. If most people said on paper, who have you spoken to the most this week? Or swapped more than 100 characters or 100 words with, like that in theory would be classed as a friendship in some circles. And but then it wouldn't be, because it's not. It's like, I've probably had, no disrespect, obviously, I'd love to be friends with you, Aid. but I've probably exchanged 50 different conversations in the last 48 hours with different people. Like, and it's partly, some of that's work, like you work with a musician, and then you speak to the like day-to-day manager, and then you speak to the press officer, and you speak to another musician. And then like one of my group chats at the moment is an artist I'm working with, and we're putting together a choir to sing on her track. And it's like, I've just introduced her to like 8 different people, and I've had to have 8 separate, it's like, it all adds up really quickly. And it's like, but we're more connected than ever, but we're more disconnected, because that ability to be always connected makes all the connections. Like, and also we live in a world of upgrade culture. Like, this is another thing, like I realize I keep putting culture on the end of things as if it like makes them bigger, but like if you upgrade apps on your phone, people feel like you can get into the VIP area in a club, and that's an upgrade, and you can get a better seat on a plane, and you can personalize your Starbucks order, which in your mind is upgraded it to the thing that you wanted. And all of these things atomize us into, well, actually, I think there's something better, grass is greener kind of concepts of developing who we are as people, all of which plays on selfishness, conservative kind of like mindsets of being one person in a silo. All of these things are the things I worry about, because without community, without a sense of belonging, without a kind of foundation and understanding that you're part of society, and as much as the Tories might talk about, was it one nation, conservatives, it's like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, you've literally just you're about to elect someone who has told Nicola Sturgeon to fuck off, that bloke in Wales to fuck off, doesn't want the Northern Ireland Protocol, like, and has told the French to fuck off. It's like, that is not, there is no one nation. It's like Little England.
I always imagined that it was a sort of a way of dismissing requests for help. So let's say you're somebody in the working to middle class, and you really need some help, like you need a new hospital wing, or you need another floor for the school, or like you just need some fucking government money to make society a bit better. And then you'll have some top-hatted, monocled Tory cunt like, no, it's conservatism, dear boy. You know, it's just sort it out yourself. You know, it's all on your shoulders. It's just solo, like nothing. There's no such thing as society or whatever. I don't think they truly believe that you should live your life kind of isolated. I just think they think I should.
And yet they make the money out of things like shares and invest in insurance.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, things like the AA like exists because we all equally contribute. We should have a national car recovery service. No one talks about that. Like, that's a basic fundamental, but we're all paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds for a service we don't use, but occasionally we might need. It's like, isn't that the exact kind of service that should be nationalized?
Yeah.
It's like, and you look at all these different things, which, like, I'm going through quite a mindset at the moment around building a new company, collectivism, but also then how you reward people for their involvement in the collective. And there's a lot of, like, I was on this course recently in Extinction Rebellion with some of the guest speakers, and they were talking about how they operate. They didn't really go into like businesses and spreadsheets and stuff. But you just start to realize, like, collectivism doesn't have a business model. Like, you have cooperatives, which kind of can exist, and you've got all these different business, like, I really like that put down of Owen Jones this week after he slagged off centrists as being Waitrose shoppers. And it's like, they're a workers collective. It's like, they are literally like, because they're part of the John Lewis group, aren't they? And it's all owned by the people. And it's like the thing that's good about the Trawl is it's literally people powered media. It is not, I mean, occasionally there's a clip from Sky News or something, but the vast majority of what goes into it is very democratic. It is what people have said on Twitter, feeding into a central hub of these people come together and we create a show out of it. And it's like that you start to put principle first and purpose first. And if you've got a shared purpose between a group of people, then you need to work out if it can kind of either achieve the thing that people are trying to achieve or pay people for their time that goes into achieving that thing. And you look at almost all of society and all you see is someone working out how to deliver the thing for the smallest price, for the biggest gain. And like, that's what I don't like about capitalism, to go back on my slightly teenage Rage Against the Machine comment. It's like all of these things, we're now seeing companies that the fair trade elements of how they operate as a business is the storytelling, is the narrative, and is the marketing. And like, you can't market a business now if there's not a story behind where it came from, who it's for, why it's there. So lots of brands will invent projects in order to show that they're doing something, and the project is this thing they can tell the story about, because underneath it all, they're Shell sponsoring an art gallery, or they're BP like being involved in like some boat race or something. It's like, because their story underneath it is not a story that they really want anyone to talk about or to tell. It's exactly the same reasons why the Daily Mail want you to talk about and get angry about Boris on his victory lap. It's like all of this stuff's interconnected, and I think I start to see the interconnectedness of things, and then that's when you start to realize, oh, I probably do have ADHD, because I'm like, my brain is just like swirling between all these different dots. But the patterns are the same. Like, the patterns in our fingers are fractals, just like the patterns in when you cut a tree open, similar to when you zoom in on a molecule. Like, all these fractals are all kind of similar. Like, and you start to see the same patterns in loneliness. Means that you're angry, and I found another group of people who are as angry as I am. Let's form a tribe. I mean, pickaxes and bows and arrows not necessary, but
it's that same feeling, like, just to go back to what you were saying before, it's that same need to be part of a tribe, to tick that sort of safety in numbers, we'll all look after each other kind of box. And
safety in shotguns, you mean?
Say again, sorry?
Safety with my lone shotgun, stroking it in the middle of a cabin in the woods. That's the Tory mindset, isn't it?
It's the what, sorry?
The Tory mindset is one man and his shotgun.
For a second, I thought you said that's the Talking Man set. I was like, is this a box set show that I've missed out on? Sean, we've been chatting for a while, man. I've got to go. Got to get inside for my babies. And
have we got all the comments to reply to?
I haven't even checked the live chat. Have I left it on thingy?
Someone told us.
No, I've got no comments this time. So we've got off lightly. Good. They didn't find us.
We didn't get cancelled yet.
No. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Sean Adams. If you want to go and check out more of his work, go to drownedinsound.com. Also give him a follow on Twitter. What's your handle on Twitter again, Sean?
Sean in Sound, SEAN.
Cool. At Sean in Sound. I'll be back next Wednesday with the solo show, and next Friday night with a guest who I have yet to book, as per usual. And thanks very much everyone for tuning in. If you have enjoyed say two or three episodes of the podcast, please do consider jumping on Patreon. There's 3 tiers on there that you can choose from. There's a £3 a month one, which is just enough to buy me a coffee or give a doff of the cap.
Half a pint.
Yeah, half a pint.
You might be able to boil 1 kettle with it, actually.
Oh, well, fucking booyah. Then there's a £5 a month tier, which gets you exclusive invites to the meetup. So the next one is on Thursday, the 27th of October in Brick Lane in London. So if you jump on that now, you can still come along to that, Thursday, the 27th of October.
Is that a bunga bunga party?
No. And Lebedev will not be there. And then there's a third tier, which is a £10 a month tier, which is fucking ridiculous. So just ignore that one. And then there's the other 2. If you're not in a position to support the podcast financially, which, look, let's be real, who is right now, all I ask is maybe give me a little share. Just click the share icon on your podcast player and pop it into a WhatsApp chat or something, or on Twitter, and share me around like the cheap tart that I am.
Do you want to know a little secret, Aid?
Always.
The one thing that if you ask people to share it with one friend that they think will enjoy it,
yeah,
they are more likely to share it with more people than one friend, but they are far more likely to think of that one friend to share it with.
Interesting.
Apparently that's psychology of talking about podcasts.
There you go. Marketing intel.
Share it to one friend.
Yeah, please.
And thank you for listening to my monologues.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, thanks again, my guest tonight, Sean, and I will be back next week. Take care, everyone. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.